Hey, everybody, this is TJR. The first month of 2022, January, came to a close last week. And I thought I would look at some of the videos that got released this month and just the comments, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we'll save the ugly for last because I know that's what you probably all clicked on for. We'll start with the most recent. We ended the month with a video that I did entitled The Unspoken Influence of Children's Music on the Music of the Beatles. And just going to go through some of the comments that video generated here. We've got a comment here from Stephen Quinn, and he writes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all good children go to heaven. And of course, that's from Abbey Road, and that's from You Never Give Me Your Money. And of course, again, there is an example where just a tiny little part of the song has this children's music influence. It's funny, after I released the video, I began to notice this even more. I gave the patron supporters early access to this video prior to it posting on the channel. And one of my patron supporters, Jeff Mills, he mentioned, hello, goodbye. You say hi, I say low, you say stop, I say go. Sounds very Dr. Seussian. Next, we have a comment from J, if I read this right here, Birdification, J Birdification, hopefully I've said that right. And he writes, my late brother was convinced that Altogether Now was a critique on colonialism. Wow, okay. All I can say is, man, I would love to have heard that critique. If you feel like elaborating on that more in the comments, J Birdification, please do so. Definitely want to know more about that. Next, we have a comment from Are You Romantic? Oh, no, not Are You Romantic? It's You Are Romantic. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You Are Romantic writes, I love children's songs, old folk songs. It's one thing that really added an extra dimension to the Beatles for me. Songs like Yellow Submarine, Octopus Garden, Altogether are some of my favorites. Nursery rhymes usually have great, memorable melodies, which the four lads also have in common. And this is a point that I wish I brought up in the video. I've often talked to people about songwriting, and I've said, learn, of course, from your heroes, play as many cover songs as you can, because by playing them, I think that's how you best understand how they're written. That's how you best dissect them and understand how songs are written, especially great songs. But I also say, look at children's songs, because they have these incredible earworm melodies that just get in your ear and then don't get out. It's a Small World, by the Sherman Brothers, from the ride, A Small World at Disneyland. People joke a lot about that song. I have too, like, oh no, I can't get it out of my head now. It'll never stop, like it's some kind of disease. But it is an earworm. It just, once it's in, it doesn't come out. Just inescapable, easy to latch onto melodies. And the Beatles were great at that. We have a comment here from Brian Gonigal. I'm just going to read his second paragraph. He brings up something rather interesting here that I definitely remember. And by the way, if you do go digging into the origins of a lot of traditional children's music, at least American children's music, you'll find a rather disturbing, reoccurring element weaving through a lot of it. Much of what is today regarded as children's music is simply popular songs of bygone eras, often dating from before the end of recorded music. Unfortunately for America, this often means music originating from minstrel shows, And while the lyrics have been sanitized over the years, if you research the original lyrics of such children's classics as Oh Susanna, Camptown Races, and Jimmy Crack Corn, you'll find some shockingly offensive lines. Even in the popular counting out rhyme, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, it wasn't originally a tiger that you caught by the toe. Given this track record, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if 100 years from now, children were singing cleaned up versions of a lot more Eminem songs than Mockingbird. Who knows? But yeah, I've been aware of this. And I'm old enough to remember hearing little kids singing Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo with the much more offensive words. And that's not all I remember. And it's just kind of an example of some of the very casual racism that existed during my childhood that doesn't exist now. I ended the year, I'm not the end of the year, I ended the month with that video here about the Beatles and children's music. And interestingly enough, I started the month with another Beatles content video entitled Their Sgt. Pepper Album. This was actually a remake of a video that I made ages ago, but never really got much of an audience. And I just felt it needed and deserved a better audience. So I remade it from scratch, posted it up, and removed the old one. And glad to see that this time it got a lot more views and gained more audience. So glad to see that. So let's look here at some of the comments that this video generated here. I asked everybody to name some other famous artists, what you would refer to as their Sgt. Pepper album. And here's some of the responses we got. John Nuanez, if I say it right, hopefully, writes, "Do not forget Purple Rain by Prince. So much to say about that album, both in creative terms for his career. His career really was never the same after that." And I will agree, his career was not the same after that. The public viewed him very differently after that. So that very well could be his Sgt. Pepper album. Although I might want others to debate that because I don't feel I know the vast majority of Prince's catalog well enough to be able to say. So any more of you more well-versed Prince aficionados, if you want to chime in on that, please do. Next, we have a comment by Jack Nissen. He then makes the comparison with Asia by Steely Dan, saying Asia by Steely Dan could be a Sgt. Pepper album. I like all Steely Dan albums, especially from their original run, but I do think Asia was a step into something more than their previous albums. Definitely you make a strong point. I'm very familiar with the Steely Dan catalog. And for a long time, starting with Can't Buy a Thrill and leading up to Gaucho, that was their entire studio output until they made a comeback and did a couple albums decades later. But everybody points to Asia as the album that was the game changer. And interestingly enough, Asia was for a long time not my favorite Steely Dan album. I like the album, but it was not my favorite. I tended to lean more towards The Royal Scam and Pretzel Logic, Katie Lied, right around that era. But a lot of people really point to Asia, and I can see that argument for Asia. As the years have gone by, I've gotten to like Asia a lot more too as well. Morton Hughes writes, "Their Sgt. Pepper's, ? Here goes. Deep Purple, Machine Head." I'm sure you'll get a lot of people agreeing with you on that one. Steely Dan, Asia. Another vote for Steely Dan, Asia. Allman Brothers, Eat a Peach. Neil Young, Harvest. Yeah, that's still probably his most famous album. That's still kind of the go-to album. And that's probably the one that I would recommend to anybody that has never really listened to him before. I would say start with Harvest. Joni Mitchell, Blue. I'm sure a lot of people will agree with you on that one. I would say Court and Spark, but I'm sure a lot of people will go with Blue. Aerosmith, Toys in the Attic. Excellent choice for that band. Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland. It's hard to say about Jimi Hendrix. Such a small output. I keep leaning towards the first album. I think that was a huge breakthrough. Carole King, Tapestry. Definitely, I think. Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. What else but, he then writes after that. I hear that. Bachman Turner, Overdrive, Not Fragile. And Creedence Clearwater Revival, Cosmos, Factory. Oh no, he also has Bob Seger's Night Moves. All good choices. Tina Turner, Private Dancer. Rolling Stones, Sticky Fingers. But good arguments could be made for Let It Bleed or Exile on Main Street. I agree. Any of those you could make good arguments for. Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Waters. Yes, their last album, but this had the most creativity, in my opinion. Janis Joplin, Pearl. CS&G, Humble Pie, Smokin'. Peter Frampton, Frampton Comes Alive, a live album, but this shot Peter up to the top. It certainly did. All very good and interesting choices here, especially if you're thinking of exploring their catalog for the first time. These are all good selections here, in my opinion. And then finally, we've got a comment here by Chris McGovern. He writes, "I love this video, TJ, but I don't agree with the Who choice. The Who sellout to me is closer to being their Sgt. Pepper, especially since that run out groove idea they had was copied from Sgt. Pepper. I guess as far as being the pinnacle or the magnum opus, most of those albums are just that, including Who's Next. Who's Next is a nice album, but it's sadly a compromised album because it was intended to be a much bigger work and quite possibly a double LP, but they ended up scrapping that and it became Who's Next. Perhaps not the worst thing to happen, but we may never know what Lifehouse would have been like as its original concept promised. And Chris, you bring up just an absolutely excellent argument about this. We'll never know what Lighthouse might have been. It might have been the greatest album ever. Then again, it might have been an album, a flawed masterpiece too. We'll never know, ever know. But you bring up a great argument. I'm still inclined to go with Who's Next because it did bring The Who to a much larger audience. And it's the album that just changed everything for them and what people thought of them and how people looked at them. But you make one hell of an excellent argument. I got to hand it to you, and I got to tip my hat to you on that comment. Great comment, Chris. And next we have a comment from James Wilson. Recently, I had reacted to the Foo Fighters movie trailer, their movie Studio 666 that's coming out in February, this coming month. And James Wilson wrote, they should have made a film about their fake disco group, the DGs, instead. Those music videos looked fun. And I just have to say yes, 100 times yes. I think that the Foo Fighters should have done a movie as the DGs. I think that would have been hysterical. Of course, not everybody may be aware with who the DGs are. Not everybody's into Record Store Day, but I think you could have had both the Foo Fighters and the DGs. In fact, maybe you could have had them fight each other or something like that. That would have been hysterical. This next comment is from John Blackstone in regards to the video, The Beatles in IMAX, just announced. He writes, yes, I have to admit, I was a little disappointed that it was the same edit. It's really my only complaint about the Get Back project. We never get to see totally uninterrupted performances of any of the master takes from the Let It Be album. It's frustrating enough when they're playing on the roof, but it's really frustrating in the studio footage that they tease us by saying, this is the take that appeared on the album and only give us about 30 seconds of the performance. That drives me nuts. And it doesn't include any of the full song performances they did in the studio on the last day, Long and Winding, Two of Us, Let It Be, etc. I know these are included in the Let It Be film, but I think it was a bad choice to leave them out of this film. Oh, well, hopefully we'll get a restored Let It Be to fill in those gaps, but I would like to have seen how Peter Jackson would have edited those performances. I feel a little guilty complaining as we've waited for decades for a project like this, but I have to be honest, for me, the Get Back film is more about what they said than the music they played. John, I understand your feelings. I will disagree because there's so much music performance in there. Yes, we don't oftentimes get full performances, but we are probably going to get the Let It Be film restored. That was announced that they would be doing that. This is how I look at it, though. The Get Back film is a rare glimpse into the Beatles' songwriting process, which is something we rarely get to see in most music documentaries. So that's how I look at it. But you make good points. This comment is, and hopefully I can say this, it's from Paradigma Minimal Wave. He writes about my video, More Vintage Vinyl Buys. He writes, please, after clean, put record in new anti-static sleeve. Yes, I realized that. In fact, Superfan called me out on that. She said to me, you're putting dirty records in an anesthetic sleeve. Clean the record first, then put it in the anesthetic sleeve. So yes, point taken. Thank you. Okay, so finally now, I want to get to some of what I call the unfathomable comments, the ones that are just like, okay, I don't know where to really go with this here. First, we've got from Tim C. He's responding to my video, Let It Be 2021 Giles Martin Remix Review, The Beatles. And he writes, I was looking for Beatles Remix, and somehow I got this dude just yakking about what? Well, Tim C., you got this dude yakking about the remix because it says on the title card, review. And if you're going to click on a review, that's what you're going to get. People talking about it, not playing you the music. There are lots of streaming services out there where you can listen to the music if that's what you want to do. In fact, you can go to the artist's Vivo page and play the release if they have it posted there, which most of them will. Not sure what you were expecting, Tim C. Clicking on a video that has a review in the title. Let's move on. Cat writes in regards to my video from quite a while back, but glad to see it's still generating comments. Did George Harrison steal My Sweet Lord? He writes, steal? Really? Similar in some ways, yes. But I can say that about a lot of songs. A person would have to be kind of an idiot to plagiarize a song and not expect people to know they ripped someone else off. I can't see George Harrison sitting down, listening to He's So Fine, and taking out the pen to rip it off. Well, I'm sure George Harrison didn't have that in mind. In fact, if you watch the video, which I kind of think you didn't, the judge said that he felt that George Harrison was guilty of subconsciously plagiarizing, not intentionally, but subconsciously, which means you hear a song in your youth, and then years and years later, you don't realize you're plagiarizing. You write a song that's very similar to something you've already heard. A lot of people do this. I've done this too, as a matter of fact. Maybe I'll make a video on that someday. But I don't believe George Harrison or consciously did this. He did it subconsciously. And there are a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of similarities with a lot of rock and roll songs. I think George Harrison got unlucky. And George Harrison himself said in interviews that he wished he had realized, or someone had pointed it out to him, because he would have just had to change it a little bit and that would have been fine. It's hard to imagine My Sweet Lord not sounding anything other than what it sounds like, how he would have changed the melody. It's hard to imagine that, but I guess, he's talented enough. He could have found a way to make it work. Joshua Whalen writes in response to the video I did when I first talked about the fact that the Beatles Get Back movie was now going to be a Disney Plus series. This is when I first mentioned that instead of being a 2.5-hour movie, whatever the runtime, it was now going to be a 3-part miniseries. And at the time, we were told 6 hours. It ends up being closer to 8, of course, but that's what we were told at the time. And Joshua Whalen writes, Disney, leave the Beatles alone, please. You have no right. This should be on Hulu like the other documentary. This is so unfathomable on so many levels. You have no right. So many people just did not understand the meaning of the word distribution. This was a Wingnuts film. This was an Apple film, not a Disney film. Disney was just supplying distribution back when it was going to be in theaters. And then when the decision was made to not show it in theaters and to instead stream it, Disney provided the platform. And that's all. That's all. And what's more, Apple and Wingnut and Apple, of course, being the Beatles company, they all agreed to this. They all thought this was a good idea. So this idea of you have no right makes it sound like Disney forced themselves on Apple Corps, the Beatles, and Wingnut's film, Peter Jackson. They forced themselves on it and forcibly made them put it on their platform. And of course, the other part of this comment that is just so amazingly unfathomable is that Hulu, if I'm not mistaken, is owned by Disney. You're always seeing those packages of Hulu, ESPN, and Disney. So it should be on that other platform, Hulu, where Disney won't have any influence. That hurt. But that's just too funny. Anyways, that's just unfathomable on so many levels. Okay. Then let's see what we've got here next. We've got Moonbot 168 commenting on my video, Led Zeppelin versus Greta Van Fleet. I posted this quite a while ago, but it's still generating comments, and that's always good to see. He writes, there was only one Zeppelin. There was only one John Bonham. Well, okay, good point. Yeah, there was only one Zeppelin. I've never heard of another band called Led Zeppelin. As far as there being only one John Bonham, you might want to consult the phone book on that, especially the British phone directories. There's a high likelihood there's probably more than one John Bonham out there. Just saying, that's all. Finally, we have a comment from Lee Tuttle, who also commented on my recent video, What is Their Sgt. Pepper album? He writes, funny how up to 1966, Paul McCartney has brown eyes and was 5'11". Then in 1967, had green eyes and was 6'2". Weird, huh? And the last 15 years or so, when George or Ringo went up to him, they would say, hello, Billy. Weird, huh? And in the last 60s and early 70s, I think he means late. And in the late 60s and early 70s, he and Linda lived on Billy Shear's father's little farm. Weird, huh? Well, Lee, all I can say in response to that is Isn't it funny how every time Superman shows up, Clark Kent is not seen eating a pastrami sandwich? That's all I can say. Actually, I will say one other thing. This video, of course, had nothing to do with the Paul is dead conspiracy. But I do appreciate this comment because it gives me a chance to bring up a video that I made a while back that is one of my favorite videos I've ever made on this channel that I don't think has ever gotten the love it deserves. In fact, I've considered remaking it just like I did with What Is Their Sgt. Pepper album, just like I did with this video. So there's a certain synchronicity here. And that is the video entitled That Time Batman Fought the Beatles. And it's a story about an actual comic book that was published at the time when this conspiracy was running rampant, where Batman solves the Paul is dead mystery. And that's been one of my favorite videos I've ever made on this channel. I'll leave a link. I'll leave links for these other videos in case you missed them. And so those are the comments for January: the good, the bad, the ugly. And let me know your comments on these comments. And everybody, thanks for hanging out in January. Let's see what February brings us. And I want to thank my patron supporters who are helping me make more videos. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, go to patreon.com/TGRTheoriginal and consider making a monthly donation. If you can't, just click like. That helps a great deal. And while you're at it, click subscribe and smash the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.